Okay, so we start with our job for today. And today we will be discussing, as you remember, last time we discussed the biofertilizers. We started with the microbial ecology, how the information of ecology is used for the benefit of agriculture. Then we discussed the plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, their mechanisms, and also the biofertilizers, what are these and how these are used. And today we are going to start with the first with the biopesticides. So my screen is available to you people?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Okay. So I think now it is available.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we are going to discuss today biopesticide, recent advances in biopesticides. These days, this is a very common word. Everybody is talking of the biopesticides. Even a few days back, there was the issue of locust, and a lot of work has been done even for the biocontrol of pesticides. And even our university has also tried some approaches using certain living things to control this locust. So what is biopesticide? So biopesticides are actually, these are certain type of pesticides derived from natural materials such as animals, plants, bacteria, or some minerals. So any material which acts as a pesticide and that is derived from natural material. That natural material may be animals, maybe plants, maybe bacteria, or maybe some animals. Those are called as biopesticides. Biopesticides are biochemicals derived from microorganisms and other natural sources and processes involving the genetic incorporation of DNA into agricultural commodities that confirm protection against pest damage. So not only the materials which are isolated from the natural things, but also sometimes genetic incorporation of DNA. You get a DNA from some living thing, and incorporate that into some agricultural commodity to protect it from the pest damage. That is also biopesticides. Its a very typical example is BT cotton, where the gene is taken from Bacillus thuringiensis bacteria and is incorporated into the cotton so that the cotton is then protected from the sucking insects, right? So that is also a biopesticide. So not only the natural materials, but sometimes the DNA from the natural living organisms that is taken and incorporated into the agricultural commodities to protect it from the pest damage, that is also called as biopesticide. So for example, garlic, mint, canola, and baking soda all have pesticidal activity and are considered as biopesticides. What are the types of biopesticides? So there are three main groups of biopesticides. Those are microbial pesticides, plant incorporated protectants, biochemical pesticides. So the biopesticides are of three types. We take up these one by one. First of all, microbial pesticides. These pesticides usually contain bacteria, viruses, fungi, nematode, protozoa, microsporida, which are the spore-forming fungi, and or their toxin proteins in crystal forms, right? So you can use these microorganisms as such, or you can use their toxin proteins in crystal forms. So before the development of science, when this gene of Bt gene, people before the incorporation of Bt gene into cotton, people were used to use those spores from Bacillus thuringiensis to control the pests. But later on, they developed the technology that those specific proteins which are responsible for killing certain diseases, certain pests, those are incorporated into the plant. So if we use bacteria, among bioagents, bacteria are the most potent. So इनका ज़्यादा असर होता है ये so these are most commonly used. On the basis of their pathogenicity, bacteria are divided further into four groups. One are the obligate pathogens. Their job is to cause disease such as Bacillus papilli. Then cristalliferous spore formers, which form spores. Its examples I have already given is the Bacillus thuringiensis. Then the third one is facultative pathogens. Their example is, please mute your mics. These are disturbing. Mute your mics. Facultative pathogens, Bacillus ferricus is its examples. And the fourth one is potential pathogens which may cause diseases such as Serratia marsens. So these are four types of bacterial biopesticides. And of these, Bacillus thuringiensis is the most effective one. I have already told you this is the Bacillus thuringiensis from where the gene is taken and is incorporated into the cotton. What is the mode of action? How the bacteria which are used as biopesticides, how they act? What is their mode of action? So bacteria produce many types of entomocidal toxins. They produce such toxins which are harmful for the insects, pests. For example, Bacillus thuringiensis produces alpha exotoxin, beta exotoxin, and delta endotoxin. These are different types of toxins which kill the kill the pest. Then the other type of mechanism may be the crystallized form of toxin are used in commercial formulation. You have that toxin from the bacteria, you crystallize that and use that for commercial formulation. And when these are ingested by pest, the crystals paralyze the digestive tracts of the insects. So when that insect takes up or ingests that crystals, its digestive system gets paralyzed and it of course can no more live then. As a consequence, the insect stops feeding and dies from the combined effect of starvation and tissue damage. Then how the viruses, they can be used as biopesticides. So viruses are considered suitable candidate for species specific. So for some specific species, viruses can be used as pesticides. They have very narrow spectrum insecticidal applications. Narrow spectrum, I have explained this. Narrow spectrum means they are effective against only a very specific species, cannot be effective against the other species. If it is broad spectrum, it means it is effective against many species. So viruses are generally narrow spectrum insecticidal applications, and they have no negative impact on plants, mammals, birds, fish, or even on non-target insects. So you target some particular insect, these are effective only against that particular insect. They cause no harm to the non-target insects, to the plants, to the mammals, birds, fish. These do not cause any effect or any harm to those. Especially these are desirable, the virus pesticides are desirable when beneficial insects are being conserved. When you are interested in conserving the beneficial insects, then you need to use virus biopesticides, which cannot be harmful. So these references are, if somebody is interested in detail, he can see this reference. He can go through the detailed paper. What is the mode of action? How the viruses, they act. So viruses invade an insect's body via the gut. They invade its gut, right? And replicate in tissues and can disrupt components of an insect's physiology, interfering with feeding, egg laying, and movement, right? So this is how the viruses, they affect the pests. The death from a virus infection usually occurs within 3 to 8 days. Then another type of biopesticides are the entomopathogenic fungi. Those fungi which are harmful for the insect pests. Over 750 species of fungi can kill insects. Some insect pathogenic fungi have restricted host ranges. So some of the fungi have restricted hosts while some have broad application. How they function, what is their mode of action? So entomopathogenic fungi invade their hosts by direct penetration of the host exoskeleton or cuticle. So the fungi enter directly into the exoskeleton or the cuticle of the insect. An infected hypha penetrates down through the host cuticle and eventually emerges into the hemocoel. Hemocoel means the body cavity of the insect. So they penetrate through the cuticle into the body of the insect, and there they can be harmful. Entry into the host involves both enzymatic degradation and mechanical pressure. So they degrade the cuticle through enzymatic degradation, or sometimes they exert mechanical pressure on the cuticle and then enter into the body of the hemocoel or the body cavity of the insect. Death is caused by tissue destruction and occasionally by toxin produced by the fungus. So its tissue is destroyed, and sometimes it produces some toxins which cause death of the insect. Then another type of biopesticides are the nematodes. So entomopathogenic nematode worms, these are the worms which are present in the soil. These are just visible to the naked eye, being about 0.5 millimeter in length. If you have some students from plant pathology, they generally study these nematodes. They have some specific lab for studying nematodes. So these are those which can be seen with naked eye. The entomopathogenic nematodes are a nematode bacterium complex forming a strong mutualistic relationship. So nematode and a bacterium, they make a complex which has a mutualistic relationship, and that bacteria break down the insect body which provides food for the nematode. So its mutualistic association का क्या होता है? What happens due to this mutualistic association is that the bacteria breaks down the insect body, and when it breaks down the insect body, it provides food to the nematodes. After the insect dies, the juvenile nematode develops to adults and reproduce. So when insect dies, the nematode, it becomes young, and it becomes adult and starts reproducing. What is the mode of action? Juvenile nematodes parasitize their hosts directly by penetrating the cuticle through natural openings and introducing symbiotic bacteria which multiply rapidly and cause death by septicemia, often within 48 hours. So they parasitize the host by directly penetrating into the cuticle, and there they cause the death within 48 hours. And the next is the entomopathogenic protozoa and microsporida. They are generally host specific and slow acting, most often producing chronic infections. So generally are host specific, they act slowly, and often are responsible for causing very serious infections. They develop only in living hosts, and many species require an intermediate host. Their main advantages are persistence and recycling in host populations. So they persist in the host and also they recycle in the host. So then there are some examples of plant incorporated protectants. So those were the microorganisms, or those were used. Now we are taking some examples of plant incorporated protectants where the protectants are incorporated into the plants, such as botanicals. When we say botanicals, it means use of plant extracts having the ability to control the pests which are used in these pesticides, right? So there are certain plants, their extract is taken, and that extract is used for application against that particular insect. For example, just a typical example, in these locust days, there were many, our teams went to the field, and many of the students and the teachers, they observed that wherever the locust went, they did not damage all the plants. Some of the plants were such that they did not cause any damage to that plant. For example, I don't know the technical name, ये अक होता है जिसे आप अक नहीं कहते जो, I don't know what is its technical name. इसको उसने कुछ नहीं कहा. So people were trying, the scientists from entomology, they were trying to have extractant from different plants like tobacco and trying to apply it as a spray, so that wherever there is the smell of that particular extractant, the locust will not go towards that side. So this is the use of plant extract. As I gave the example of tobacco, chrysanthemum, these are different examples of different plants which can be used. Turpentine, these can be used to control certain pests. Then the next type is biochemical pesticides. Before going to the biochemical pesticides, the biochemical pesticides actually are the allelochemicals. What are allelochemicals? Can anybody tell me what are allelochemicals? Rifat Batul, what are allelochemicals?
यस सर, एलिलोकेमिकल्स ये होते हैं सर, पौधा जो है ना कुछ केमिकल रिलीज करता है जो कि दूसरे प्लांट की ग्रोथ को या सप्रेस करते हैं या उसकी ग्रोथ को इंक्रीज करते हैं, जैसे सॉर्गम है।
Allelochemicals generally they suppress the growth. So you are right. So generally they suppress the growth, and these are used for particularly for suppressing the weeds, right? So जैसे for example in agronomy department they have extracted it from sorghum, and they have developed a product which is called as sorghum, and they use that for suppressing certain weeds. So allelochemicals, these are the chemicals released from the plant leaves, stems, and roots that have the ability to affect a pest called as allelochemicals. Yeah, I think everybody knows that the weeds are also pests. Weeds, जड़ी बूटियां जो हैं, these are also considered as pests. Rather, these are very important pests because they also cause serious damage to your ultimately to your yields. So these may be phytohormones that enhance nearby plant growth or toxic substances that inhibit the nearby pest. And another example, when I was discussing the plant growth promoting bacteria, I told you at that time, recent advances is the allelopathic bacteria. Previously, जैसे अभी रिफत ने she explained allelochemical as the extracts or the chemicals which are obtained from plants. But in recent science, there are such bacteria also which can do the role of allelopathy, means they also produce certain chemicals which can suppress the weeds, right? So our lab is particularly working on this area where we are using certain bacteria for suppressing the weeds. And their dual benefit is that they not only suppress the weeds, but at the same time, they also improve the relevant crop yield. जो क्रॉप होती है उसकी yield को ये improve करते हैं, और जो weeds होती हैं उसकी yield को suppress करते हैं. So the concept of allelopathic bacteria has recently been introduced in microbiology. So then these are the allelochemicals. Then in case of biochemical pesticides, another example is pheromones. Pheromones specifically disrupt the reproductive cycle of harmful insects. So they are also called as sex pheromones, right? So to control the fruit fly, people generally have traps where they have these pheromones. So these pheromones are the sex pheromones or the hormones which ultimately disrupt the reproductive cycle of harmful insects. They can be applied at specific life stage of pest. And they are portable, less expensive, and a more natural form of crop protecting agent. Now, we discussed different type of biopesticides. Now, what are the advantages of biopesticides? So these are usually inherently less harmful than conventional pesticides, right? So if you apply conventional pesticides, their residues can stay in the soil, and from there they can be taken up by the plant, and then they can enter into the food chain, and ultimately through the food chain, their residues can even reach our body. We can have that food, and those pesticides can go to our body and can cause certain diseases, certain problems for the human beings or the animals as well. But the biopesticides usually are less harmful than the conventional pesticides. They do not leave harmful residues. Generally, as I said earlier, they do not leave harmful residues. And these are designed to affect just the specific target organism in contrast to broad spectrum of conventional ones. So there are many broad spectrum pesticides, but the biopesticides are generally designed for a specific target organism. They damage only that target organism. They don't have any damage to the other organisms. They are effective in small quantities and often disperse quickly, thereby resulting in lower exposures, right? So there are very less exposures to the non-target people or the insects. Avoiding the pollution problems caused by conventional pesticides. So when you apply conventional pesticides, there are the problems of pollution, self-explanatory. Everybody knows that when you are spraying pesticides, these are causing pollution. They greatly reduce the use of conventional synthetics while crop yields remain high. So they avoid the harmful damage due to pests, but still the crop yields remain high. You do not have the harmful effect of the synthetic chemicals, but still your crop yields, they remain high. They are often cheaper than chemical pesticides. And they have some disadvantages as well. So what are the disadvantages of biopesticides? So they have very high specificity, which will require an accurate identification of the pest or pathogen and may require multiple pesticides to be used. So as we said earlier, that they are very high specific. So if it has a benefit, it has a disadvantage also. Disadvantage in this sense that if there are more than one pests, then you will have to apply more than one biopesticides. You will have to have multiple pesticides to control different pests over there. Then they often have variable efficacy due to the influence of various biotic and abiotic factors. So certain biotic and abiotic factors, they also affect their efficacy. For example, if the temperature becomes high, their efficacy may be decreased. If the temperature comes low, their efficacy may be increased, or vice versa. What are the constraints in the promotion of biopesticides? Then why we are not using the biopesticides? Why we are not promoting biopesticides? What are the constraints in the promotion of biopesticides? So those are technological problems. You don't have such advanced technology which can be used to promote the biopesticides. There are certain financial issues. These generally are sometimes costly. These are extension related issues. You need to tell to the farmers that how they have to use this, and you have to tell them, for example, some common plant, and you just get the extractant of that plant and spray that, for example, neem oil, and you can have very good results. So you need to tell the people about that. Then regulatory and statutory issues. So there are certain government rules need to be developed so that those can be regulated. Because the adulteration and the so-called malpractices are very common in our society. So people may sell, you can say, unuseful things as you can say biopesticides, whereas they may have no effect. So we need to have regulatory or statutory uh, rules or regulations. So that's it about biopesticides. So before I start with the next topic, if you have any question, you can ask. You can unmute your mic and you can ask any question about biopesticides.
सर ये एलिलोपैथिक बैक्टीरिया जो आपने बोला that suppress
Allelopathic.
disease सर
Allelopathic.
बता रहा हूँ
Yes.
yes sir एलिलोपैथिक बैक्टीरिया that suppress disease and improve yield सर इसकी एप्लीकेशन कैसे करेंगे क्रॉप्स पे
देखें, first is I did not say that the allelopathic bacteria suppress disease. आज हमने बात की है पेस्टिसाइड्स की. They suppress the insects or the pests. And I told you that weeds are also pests. So allelopathic bacteria, what they do is they suppress the weeds. Now your question is how to apply that. There may be different approaches. The approach that we are using is we coat it on the seed, crop seed. For example, if you want to sow wheat, so at the time of sowing, this is in the form of a powder. You apply, spray it on the wheat seed. After moistening the seed, you spray it on the seed and it sticks to the seed. And then you sow the seed. So it goes with the seed to the field and there it multiplies. And when the weeds grow, it produces certain compounds which suppresses the weeds. So this is one approach how these can be applied. The second approach is we are working on that you can coat these on nanoparticles, or you can coat these on the chemical fertilizers so that the farmer applies the chemical fertilizers and these bacteria also go with the chemical fertilizers. So these are the different approaches which can be used to spray to apply these allelopathic bacteria. Yes,
सर इन बैक्टीरिया को डिजीज के अगेंस्ट इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकते ना
No, these are not for diseases. Diseases के लिए जो होते हैं वो और होते हैं, वो बायो कंट्रोल
जब
एजेंट्स
इम्प्रूव
हैं.
यील्ड करते हैं तो डिजीज भी कंट्रोल कर लेंगे
नो, वो बायो कंट्रोल एजेंट्स होते हैं जो डिजीजेस के अगेंस्ट इफेक्टिव होते हैं. दीज आर allelopathic बैक्टीरिया जो स्पेसिफिकली वीड्स के लिए हैं. हो सकता है कि इनमें से कुछ डिजीज के अगेंस्ट भी इफेक्टिव हों, लेकिन इनका स्पेसिफिक जो पर्पस है that is to suppress the weeds.
Yes, sir. Sir.
ठीक है जी?
Yes.
Okay. So if no more question about this topic, then we start with the next now I'm going to share another screen, this time new topic. So can you see this new screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So our next topic is BioGeoChemical cycling. So you have already studied these cycles in your BS class, but now we will be discussing a little bit more detail in this class, and then when you will go to your PhD, then you will go even more technicalities. So if you remember, I did tell you in my perhaps first class that sometimes the question remains the same, but it is the depth of the answer that changes. In your BS class, you studied these biogeochemical cycles, but there was no so much details or so much complex. But as you are moving to the higher classes, more details and more complexity will be coming in, and you will be using those complexities. So the biogeochemical cycles. on the very first day, I told you one thing, that one of the most important functions of the microorganisms is the nutrient cycling, that they are very important for nutrient cycling. Right from our childhood, we are listening that there is 78 or 79% nitrogen, and still we say that it is 78 or 79% nitrogen. Why it is not decreasing? It is the cycling which is going on. It is the beauty of the nature, that nature has made up such a system that cycle continues. And this is the job of these tiny creatures, these microorganisms, who continue that cycle. So in this chapter, we will study how the microorganisms are responsible for these biogeochemical cycles, right? So first, let us see what is biogeochemical cycle. So as you know, means living. So means biosphere, where the living things are dealt with. So bio refers to the biosphere, and geo refers collectively to the lithosphere, atmosphere, and hydrosphere, right? So lithosphere, atmosphere, and hydrosphere all are covered in the word geo. So bio means the biosphere, and geo means collectively the lithosphere, atmosphere, and hydrosphere. And I believe I need not to tell you in MSc what is lithosphere, atmosphere, and hydrosphere.
Yes, sir.
And what is chemical? Chemical refers to the chemicals that go through the cycle. So biogeochemical, we can now define this biogeochemical cycle as a circuit or pathway by which a chemical element or molecule moves through both biotic and abiotic compartments of an ecosystem, right? So ecosystem, if you remember, just to recall you, means the ecosystem is the interaction of the living and the non-living things, right? So biogeochemical cycle can be defined as a circuit or pathway by which a chemical element or molecule moves through both biotic and abiotic compartments of an ecosystem. So means it enters into a living body, then into a non-living body, then again to a living body, non-living body, again to the non-living body. So this whole cycle is called as biogeochemical cycle, right? So the biogeochemical cycles can be of different types. One is gas cycle. It's clear from the word that in gas cycle, elements move through the atmosphere. Main reservoirs are the atmosphere and the ocean, right? So that where the elements move through the atmosphere means through the gaseous phase. That is called as gas cycle. And another type of cycle is called as sedimentary cycle. So as the word sedimentary is explaining, so sedimentary cycle, the elements move from land to water to sediment, right? So from land to water to sediment, and main reservoirs are the soil and sedimentary rocks, right? So what are the gas cycles? Okay, Shaista Parveen, What are the gas cycles? Can you give me some examples? Are you listening?
Yes, sir.
So what are gas cycles? Very simple question, no rocket science. It's your everyday observation.
सर नाइट्रोजन साइकिल कार्बन
No,
डाइऑक्साइड
no, no, no. जिससे मैंने पूछा है वही बताए पहले। जी। Okay, Ruullah is appearing. Ruullah. What is gas cycle? Can you give some example? Yes, now Usman Faryad.
मे बी नाइट्रोजन साइकिल कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड साइकिल
Yes, you're right. Nitrogen goes to the atmosphere. आपके सामने लिखी पड़ी है definition. मैंने कहा था वो it moves through the atmosphere. Nitrogen goes to the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide goes to the atmosphere. So those are the examples. So you can say nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, two typical examples. So carbon, nitrogen, and very typical oxygen. These are the gas cycles, and the sedimentary cycles are phosphorus and sulfur, right? So these are present in the soil. Phosphorus, sulfur, so they move from land to water to sediment, right? So these are the examples of biogeochemical cycles. So we have to go through all these cycles. First of all, we take up the carbon cycle. Okay. So what is carbon cycle? These days, everybody is talking of the carbon dioxide, increasing level of carbon dioxide. So everybody these days, the world over, people are have the concern about high levels of carbon dioxide in the Earth atmosphere. That constitutes the public's pivotal interest in the global carbon cycle. So everybody is scared of the increasing carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere. So that's why everybody is interested in global carbon cycle. What is happening to the global carbon cycle? Everybody is interested in that. You know that the carbon dioxide cycle continues through two very typical processes. In photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is used from the atmosphere, and through respiration, carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere, right? So this is the typical, you can say the simplest form of carbon cycle, photosynthesis and the respiration, which continue the cycle. So for soil scientists, other pools and fluxes of carbon are of equally high interest. So for a common man, he is of the concern of increasing carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere only. Whereas the soil scientists, they need also to study the other pools and fluxes of carbon, from where the carbon comes, where it is converted, and where it goes, right? Because he needs carbon in the soil as well, because you know carbon is an essential nutrient also. So he needs to have carbon in the soil as well. So that's why he will have to study the other pools and fluxes of carbon, the soil scientist. Particularly important for a soil scientist is the balance between autotrophic fixation, primarily by green plants, which brings carbon from the atmosphere into the biosphere, and respiration, which releases carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere. If you remember autotrophic, I explained in some previous class, autotrophic means the carbon is obtained from carbon dioxide and energy from some inorganic source, right? So for a soil scientist, it is important that how much carbon is fixed through autotrophic fixation by green plants. Green plants, you know, they get carbon from carbon dioxide and energy from sunlight. So that is autotrophic fixation. So green plants, how much, what is the balance, how much carbon dioxide they are taking up from the atmosphere and converting it or taking it into the biosphere means it is converted, that carbon dioxide is converted into glucose through photosynthesis. And then in respiration, that carbon dioxide is released back to the atmosphere. So a soil scientist needs to study the balance between the photosynthesis and respiration. Or in other words, you can say he needs to have information about the autotrophic fixation, which is photosynthesis, and respiration. What is the relationship between these? He needs to study this. Much of the respiratory activity on Earth actually occurs in the soil. So most of the respiration that is releasing carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, most of the respiratory activity is taking place in the soil. So the soil microorganisms, they are responsible for respiration, and the plant roots themselves, they are also responsible for respiration. So most of the respiratory activity is taking place in the soil. And soil respiration represents decomposition of organic residues, root respiration, and slow decay of soil organic matter. So when I said that most of the respiration takes place in the soil, so that is the decomposition of organic residues. When the organic residues present in the soil or organic matter, when that undergoes decomposition, carbon dioxide is released and that goes to the atmosphere. When the roots respire, carbon dioxide is released and that goes to the atmosphere. And when slow decay of soil organic matter takes place, carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere. So currently, soil scientists are refocusing considerable effort towards quantifying soil respiration. So people are now trying to quantify how much respiration is taking place in the soil so that they can have a better understanding of the carbon cycle. So remember, beginning in the 18th century, land cleaning with accompanying cultivation accelerated soil respiration and was the largest contributor to carbon dioxide buildup in the atmosphere from that time until 1950. So 18th century में the people, they thought of agriculture and they started land cleaning, cutting the trees and trying to cultivate that soil for growing crops. So when they did that, this accelerated the soil respiration. And that was the largest contributor to carbon dioxide buildup in the atmosphere from that time until 1950. So मैंने ये बात की है कि 18वीं सदी से लेके जब लोगों ने जमीन जंगलात काट के वहां पे फसलें उगानी शुरू की, उस वक्त से लेके 1950 तक मेजर जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड का बिल्डअप हुआ वो इस वजह से हुआ कि लोगों ने जंगलात काट के वहां पे फसलें उगानी शुरू कर दी, जिससे रेस्पिरेशन ज्यादा हुई, and due to that higher respiration, carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere increased, build up. We now recognize that accelerated soil respiration occurs during the initial 50 plus years of cultivation of virgin soils. During that period, topsoil may lose 30 to 50% of their organic carbon. So scientists have now established that when you harvest a forest and you start cultivation over there, means that was a virgin soil, there was no cultivation. So you start cultivation over there, then in the initial about 50 years, soil loses 30 to 50% of its organic carbon. So it's 30 to 50% of organic carbon is converted into carbon dioxide and goes to the atmosphere. Nevertheless, soil organic matter in mineral soils remains a major storehouse or sink of global carbon, containing about twice that in the atmosphere. इसके बावजूद जो मैंने पहले बात की कि पहले 50 साल में 30 to 50% carbon is lost, still in mineral soil, soil organic matter is the major storehouse of global carbon, which is about 2 times higher than that which is present in the atmosphere. So that's why that now these days, वो जो पुराना जमाना होता था जिसमें कहते थे दब के वात राज्य के खा, वो दौर अब गुजर गया है. Now people say go for minimum cultivation. For minimum tillage means when you do the tillage, you expose your organic matter to higher decomposition. And when higher decomposition takes place, more carbon dioxide is lost to the atmosphere. And that is our problem these days. And this is the increasing level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is responsible for increasing the temperature of the earth, which is the climate change phenomena. So thus, any change in this pool, means the soil pool, can significantly influence the global carbon dioxide level. So we need to adopt such practices which can retain the carbon for maximum time in the soil. So we have to have store maximum carbon dioxide in the soil, and that of course is stored in the form of organic matter. Each of the two major biological fluxes of carbon dioxide in nature, namely photosynthetic fixation and global respiration, transfer about 7% of atmospheric carbon annually, but in opposite directions. So both photosynthesis and respiration, both annually, they transfer about 7% of the carbon, but in opposite directions. In photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is fixed, while in respiration, carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere. All organic matter eventually is oxidized or burned and converted back to carbon dioxide and water. And during last week, you know that our institute also tried to create awareness amongst the people not to burn their organic matter, because people harvested the rice crop and they have the habit of burning that organic matter. Those वो क्या कहते हैं जो crop residues होते हैं, people are used to burn that, and that causes two major issues for soil scientists. One is the loss of carbon from the soil. Second is buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the third one, which is very important these days, is the smog. That smoke goes up and it mixes with the fog and is converted to smog. And that smog is creating problems, diseases, and many issues, right? So this is actually what is happening. What is, you can say, what I have said, the summary of that, that carbon dioxide in the air through photosynthesis in the leaves is converted into glucose, right? And that glucose or starch is stored in the leaf. And how this takes place? This takes place that the plant gets water from the roots and carbon dioxide from the air, and in the leaves photosynthesis takes place, and during photosynthesis glucose or the starch is produced. So this is photosynthesis, water and carbon dioxide and sunlight. They give rise to starch and they release oxygen into the air, right? So this is the simplest way of carbon. So during respiration, what happens then? This glucose which was produced during photosynthesis, during respiration, that glucose is oxidized and gives back the carbon dioxide, water, and energy, right? So that carbon dioxide goes back to the atmosphere. So, put another way, 30 to 300 years of photosynthetic fixation without renewal by respiration would exhaust the atmosphere of its carbon dioxide. So what I have said is, जो मैंने बात पहले की है कि ऐसे फोटोसिंथेसिस होती है, ग्लूकोज बनता है, उसकी फिर रेस्पिरेशन हो जाती है और कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड वापस एटमॉस्फेयर में चले जाती है. सो अगर हम एक अंदाजा लगाएं तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि अगर रेस्पिरेशन ना हो, मींस जो ग्लूकोज बन रहा है वो दोबारा से ऑक्सीडाइज होके कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड में कन्वर्ट ना हो और कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एटमॉस्फेयर में ना जाए, तो 30 से 300 साल तक हमारे लिए जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है वो काफी होगी, लेकिन उसके बाद कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड नहीं रहेगी. और जब कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड नहीं होगी तो क्या होगा? कैन एनीबॉडी गेस? Ramesh Ali, can you guess what will happen when there will be no carbon dioxide? Ramesh Ali. Okay. Muhammad Mughis. Yes, you have raised hand.
सर फोटोसिंथेसिस नहीं होगा सर जी, इसके ग्लूकोज वगैरह क्या कहते हैं सर, प्रिपेयर नहीं होगा.
रिजल्ट क्या होगा ये तो मैंने बता दिया है ना. अल्टीमेटली क्या होगा?
फूड नहीं होगा सर.
फूड नहीं होगा, लाइफ नहीं होगी.
लाइट नहीं होगी.
ये ठीक है, बिकॉज हमने ये डिस्कस किया था, द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट बायोकेमिकल प्रोसेस इज फोटोसिंथेसिस. आवर प्राइमरी प्रोड्यूसर्स आर प्लांट.
यस.
And when the plants will have no food, no photosynthesis, then of course there will be no life because the primary producers will not be there, right? So today Muhammad Umar also raised hand. Okay, I'll ask question in a little bit later. In an agricultural ecosystem, crop residues constitute the primary carbon source that furnishes a substrate for the soil biota and gives rise to the respiratory release of carbon dioxide into the local atmosphere, right? So agriculture में क्या होता है? अगर हम agricultural ecosystem की बात करें तो what happens is we have the crop residues which are the primary carbon source for the microorganisms which are present in the soil, and they give rise, the microorganisms, they use that crop residue as food source, and when they use that they decompose that, and as a result of that carbon dioxide is released into the local atmosphere. So in agricultural ecosystem, crop residues are the major source of carbon in the soil and then of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. ठीक है? Decomposition of organic residues is a major function of the vast soil microbial population. So, whatsoever the organic residues are present, the major function of the microorganisms, the soil microorganisms, is the decomposition of those organic residues. Muhammad Umar,
Yes, sir.
had there been no microorganisms, what would have happened? अगर माइक्रोऑर्गेनिज्म ना होते तो क्या हो सकता था?
सर डिकम्पोजिशन ना होती और न्यूट्रिएंट साइक्लिंग का सर इसमें मेजर जो कॉज करते हैं माइक्रोब्स प्लांट को सर न्यूट्रिएंट वो क्या कहते हैं नाइट्रोजन ना मिलती सर
ओके,
और उसके अलावा सर डिकम्पोजिशन ना होती सर।
ओके ठीक है, और क्या होता?
और अगर डिकम्पोजिशन ना होती तो सर,
अगर डिकम्पोजिशन ना होती तो क्या होता?
तो सर क्या कहते हैं सॉइल हमारे रैन तो सर इससे सर वो ऑर्गेनिक जो वेस्ट है सर वो डिकम्पोज ना होता तो सॉइल पे रहने के लिए जगह कम होती है।
वेरी गुड,
और
एक्सीलेंट।
सर उसके अलावा गंदगी से बड़ी।
यस, वेरी गुड, एक्सीलेंट। यस, so this is one of the very important function of the microorganisms. Had there been no microorganisms, everywhere there would have been waste, and there would have been no place for human beings to live. अगर ये कूड़ा करकट ये जो या बाड़े काटते हैं, ग्रास काटते हैं, क्रॉप रेजिड्यूज हैं, अगर ये डीकम्पोज ना हो तो जमीन पे, प्लेनेट पे हमारे रहने के लिए जगह खत्म हो गई होती, हर जगह पे ये कूड़ा करकट ही पड़ा होता। So decomposition of organic residues is a major function of the vast soil microbial population. So when one thinks of these things, his belief in Allah the Almighty becomes even firm. कि देखें अल्लाह ताला ने कैसा निज़ाम रखा है कि उसने ये टाइनी क्रिएचर्स बना दिए हैं, छोटे छोटे से माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स जो इसको डिकम्पोज करते हैं। अगर यही ना होते तो डिकम्पोजिशन ही ना होती, हमारे रहने के लिए जगह ही ना होती। सो एक तरफ ये डिकम्पोजिशन से हमारे लिए जगह क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, दूसरी तरफ ये कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड रिलीज कर रहे हैं एटमॉस्फेयर में जो फोटोसिंथेसिस में यूज हो रही है, और इस तरह से प्राइमरी प्रोड्यूसर्स बन रहे हैं, उनको हम फूड के तौर पे यूज कर रहे हैं, उससे रेस्पिरेशन हो रही है, रेस्पिरेशन से कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड फिर एटमॉस्फेयर में जा रही है। सो दिस इज द ब्यूटी ऑफ नेचर। सो wherever we try to disturb this nature, we suffer with certain problems, with certain issues. All right, we continue with that. So these residues, the bulk of which are of plant origin, constitute a reservoir of energy stored in carbon compounds. ठीक है? So ये जो ऑर्गेनिक रेजिड्यूज होते हैं वो जब डिकम्पोज होते हैं तो उससे एनर्जी रिलीज होती है, जिनको माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स भी यूज करते हैं। एंड इवन यू हैव द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ फॉसल फ्यूल्स, जब वो कार्बन बहुत ज्यादा अरसा तक स्टोर रहती है नीचे, तो it is that carbon which is converted into petrol and gas like that. So heterotrophic soil microorganisms need heterotrophic, heterotrophic microorganisms are those which get their carbon from organic carbon source and energy from the decomposition of or from the oxidation of some organic source. So heterotrophic soil microorganisms need the energy in carbon sources derived through photosynthesis of green plants to grow, multiply and survive. So जितने heterotrophic soil microorganisms हैं उन्हें ग्रो करने के लिए, मल्टीप्लाई करने के लिए और सर्वाइव करने के लिए ऑर्गेनिक कार्बन के सोर्सेज चाहिए। और वो ऑर्गेनिक कार्बन के सोर्सेज किधर से आते हैं? फोटोसिंथेसिस से। कार्बन जो फोटोसिंथेसिस से बनते हैं, प्लांट्स बन रहे हैं, प्लांट ग्रो कर रहे हैं, ऑल दोज आर the green plants, photosynthesis, all these are the sources of organic carbon. So उस organic carbon से microorganisms जो heterotrophic हैं, they can grow, multiply, and survive. So the simplest diagram or form of the carbon cycle might be a gross oversimplification in terms of geochemical cycling. However, it demonstrates the essential points. So मैं कार्बन साइकिल की एक सिंपलेस्ट आपको ड्रा करके दिखाऊंगा अभी यहाँ पे. So जो मैंने बात कर भी दी है अभी, that the carbon dioxide is fixed via photosynthesis into carbohydrate and other reduced compounds. And these in turn are ultimately metabolized to methane and carbon dioxide. So this is the simplest form of carbon cycle. So these are the aerobic conditions and below are the anaerobic conditions. So under aerobic conditions, carbon dioxide is taken up through photosynthesis and it is converted into carbohydrates, glucose or other carbohydrates. And those carbohydrates undergo respiration and they release carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide under anaerobic conditions may also undergo photosynthesis and produce carbohydrates. But under that condition, there may be the respiration and fermentation and carbon dioxide is released, and at the same time, these carbohydrates under anaerobic conditions, instead of releasing carbon dioxide, these may be converted with the help of methanogens through the process of methanogenesis to methane. ठीक है? Methanogens are the methane producing microorganisms, and this process of producing methane is called as methanogenesis. So when conditions are anaerobic, carbohydrates, instead of giving rise to carbon dioxide, they may give rise to methane. ठीक है? So during the process of methanogenesis, carbon dioxide may give rise to methane. That methane can also be released to the atmosphere, or that methane can be used by the methanotrophs and convert it into carbon dioxide. Methanotrophs are those which use methane as energy source. ठीक है? So try to understand the difference between methanogens and methanotrophs. Methanogens are those microorganisms which produce methane, and methanotrophs are those which use methane. Okay? So this is the simplest form of carbon cycle. Okay? During aerobic conditions, carbon dioxide to carbohydrates, and during respiration, those back to carbon dioxide. Under anaerobic conditions, carbohydrates, carbon dioxide, but there is the possibility of methane also. And that methane through methanotrophs may also come back to carbon dioxide, which then again continues the cycle, right? So इसमें किसी को अगर कोई क्वेश्चन है तो वो पूछ ले इससे पहले कि मैं आगे जाऊं. If anybody has any question or any confusion in this cycle.
सर इसमें मीथेन जरूर प्रोड्यूस होगी सर इसमें एनारोबिक में.
क्या
एनारोबिक सर एनारोबिक कंडीशन में सर जो मीथेन है वो लाजमी प्रोड्यूस होगी या मे भी मतलब चांसेस हैं या जरूरी होगी?
नहीं, लाजमी नहीं है. अगर वहां पे मीथेनोजेंस हैं तो दैट कैन बी चेंज टू मीथेन, अदरवाइज दैट कैन गो बैक टू कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड. लाजमी नहीं है बट पॉसिबिलिटी इज देयर. देखिए
ठीक हो गया. और सर
इफ यू लुक एट दिस एरो, मैंने उसको वापस कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड में भी भेजा है.
ठीक हो गया सर, थैंक यू
जी. एनी अदर क्वेश्चन अगर किसी को समझ नहीं आई इस साइकिल में तो ओके, वी मूव फॉरवर्ड. So this is the same carbon cycle. You put in another way, you can see the same thing, that the plants, they are undergoing photosynthesis, and during photosynthesis they are producing glucose or the carbohydrates, and the plant residues, they are falling on the earth. Those plant residues and the dead animals, they are contributing to the plant and animal debris or the organic matter, the animal wastes and the dead animals also contribute to the plant and animal debris. All this is the reduced carbon, right? And this reduced carbon is oxidized to carbon, means undergoes oxidation, undergoes decomposition, and converted to carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide goes to the atmosphere. ठीक है? Or the animals, they can respire and they can release carbon dioxide, or during night the plants, they also release carbon dioxide. So this is another way of putting the carbon cycle. This is another way of putting the carbon cycle. All those concepts, that the decay of organisms, organic carbon, dead organisms and waste products. I just told you that the dead carbon or the carbon material over a long period of time ultimately results in fossils and fossil fuels. Or if it undergoes decomposition or through root respiration, it is released into the atmosphere. Industry is also releasing certain gases into the atmosphere. So plant respiration, animal respiration, these also are releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Okay? So this carbon dioxide and sunlight combine together in photosynthesis, water from the soil, and you get the organic carbon. So this is the simplest form of carbon cycle. This is another way of carbon cycle, the same that I showed you in the first picture, that the carbon dioxide under aerobic condition and water, right? They give rise to carbohydrates. And when respiration takes place, this carbohydrate gives rise back to carbon dioxide. This is under aerobic conditions. But under anaerobic conditions, जो मैंने वहां पे डिस्कस किया था, this carbohydrate may give rise to alcohols, acids, or fossil fuels, right? Or these may undergo respiration and give rise back to the carbon dioxide, or methanogenesis can take place. This can be converted into methane. So that जो मैंने सबसे पहले आपको cycle दिखाया था, that was the simplest and comprehensive way of putting the carbon cycle, representing the carbon cycle. So now, having discussed that, we can say, what is the reservoir of carbon? First, we must know that a sink or source of an element is called as reservoir. सोर्स क्या है किसी एलिमेंट का या सिंक क्या है किसी का, उसको हम रेजरवायर कहते हैं. जैसे मिसाल के तौर पे कार्बन की बात कर लें कि कार्बन आती कहां से है, उसका सोर्स क्या है, उसका सिंक क्या है, that is called as reservoir. The chemicals are sometimes held for long periods of time in one place. For example, coal deposits that are storing carbon for a long period of time, जिसको हम बाद में फिर फॉसल फ्यूल्स में देखते हैं कि वो पेट्रोल बन जाता है, गैस बन जाती है. ठीक है. इसी तरह से होता है एक दूसरा कॉन्सेप्ट एक्सचेंज पूल का. व्हाट इज एक्सचेंज पूल? So when chemicals are held for only short period of time, for example, plants and animals which temporarily use carbon in their systems and release it back into the air or surrounding medium, is called as exchange pool. ठीक है. So plant and animals are exchange pool. कार्बन उनमें आती है, थोड़ी देर रहती है और फिर चेंज हो जाती है, या रेस्पिरेशन से, या जब प्लांट डेड होता है तो उसकी डीकंपोजिशन से. ठीक है. सो दिस इज कॉल्ड एज एक्सचेंज पूल. रेजरवायर क्या है? जिसमें वो ज्यादा देर तक फॉर लॉन्ग पीरियड एक जगह पे स्टोर रहती है, उसको हम रेजरवायर कहते हैं. और जब थोड़े पीरियड के लिए स्टोर रहती है कोई भी एलिमेंट, इट इज नॉट स्पेसिफिक फॉर कार्बन, जनरल बात कर रहा हूं, और कार्बन क्योंकि हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं इसलिए उसकी एग्जांपल है. सो एक्सचेंज पूल क्या है? कि वो ज्यादा अरसे तक नहीं रहती किसी एक जगह पे, बल्कि सिर्फ थोड़ी देर के लिए एक जगह पे रहती है और आगे चले जाती है। मींस इट जस्ट कह लें आपके एक्सचेंज का रोल प्ले करती है कि आपकी कॉल आगे ट्रांसफर कर देती है। Generally, reservoirs are abiotic factors. Remember a very basic concept. Generally, reservoirs are abiotic factors, while exchange pools are biotic factors. याद रखें, जब भी जो भी एलिमेंट या कार्बन है ज्यादा देर तक स्टोर रहता है तो वो एबायोटिक फैक्टर है। मींस वो किसी केमिकल की फॉर्म में रहेगा, वहां पे फॉसल फ्यूल बन जाएगा, पेट्रोल बन जाएगा, गैस बन जाएगी। जबकि जो एक्सचेंज पूल होता है वो इन जनरल बायोटिक फैक्टर होता है। प्लांट हैं, एनिमल्स हैं, ह्यूमन बीइंग्स हैं, ठीक है। सो अब हम स्पेसिफिकली बात करते हैं कार्बन रेजर्व। फर्स्ट वी डिफाइंड द रेजर्वायर एंड एक्सचेंज पूल। अब हम कार्बन की बात करते हैं। व्हाट इज द कार्बन रेजर्वायर? सो देयर आर वेरियस ग्लोबल रेजर्वायर्स ऑफ कार्बन, some of large and some of small size. Carbonate rock in Earth's sediment is the largest carbon reservoir. So सबसे बड़ी कार्बन का जो रेजरवायर है वो क्या है? जैसे आप कहते हैं ये पानी का रेजरवायर बनाना है, हमने डैम बनाना है, ऐसे कार्बन का सबसे बड़ा जो रेजरवायर है दैट इज कार्बोनेट रॉक, जो अर्थ सेडिमेंट में मौजूद है। एंड इट इज 4 ऑर्डर ऑफ मैग्नीट्यूड ग्रेटर देन द कार्बोनेट विच इज प्रेजेंट इन द ओशन। समुंदर में जो कार्बन मौजूद है ये उससे 4 गुना ज्यादा है। अब समुंदर में कितनी कार्बन मौजूद है आप अंदाजा कर लें, कितनी लाइफ है वहां पे प्लांट्स भी हैं, वहां पे एनिमल्स भी हैं, वहां पे लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स, माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स भी हैं, वो सारी कार्बन है ना। तो उन सब से, और ये भी आपको पता है कि 3 हिस्से पानी के हैं और 1 हिस्सा खुश्की है, तो वो जो 3 हिस्से पानी हैं वहां पे लाइफ ज्यादा है, तो उससे 4 गुना ज्यादा कार्बन रेजरवायर जो है वो ये कार्बोनेट रॉक में है। एंड दिस इज 6 times higher than the carbon reservoir as carbon dioxide. Everybody is talking of increasing carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere, लेकिन जो अर्थ सेडिमेंट में कार्बोनेट रॉक पड़ी हुई है वो एटमॉस्फेयर की कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड से 6 गुना ज्यादा है। सो इतनी कार्बोनेट रॉक हमारे पास सॉइल में मौजूद है। अब जब वो डिकम्पोज होगी, ऑक्सीडाइज होगी, तो एटमॉस्फेयर में जाएगी तो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड बनेगी। सो कार्बन रेजरवायर मेजर जो है वो कार्बोनेट रॉक की फॉर्म में अर्थ पे है। Carbon most available for photosynthesis is the smallest of the reservoirs, the atmosphere. So जो एटमॉस्फेयर में कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है वो सबसे छोटा रेजरवायर है जिससे दुनिया परेशान हुई है। Thus it is smallest most actively cycled reservoir. एक जनरल प्रिंसिपल याद रखें ज़हन में रखने के लिए, जितना रेजरवायर छोटा होगा उतना वो ज्यादा एक्टिव होगा, जितना रेजरवायर बड़ा होगा उतना वो इनएक्टिव होगा। सो स्मॉलेस्ट रेजरवायर जो है वो हमने कहा एटमॉस्फेयर में जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है वो है। सो इट इज मोस्ट एक्टिवली साइकिल्ड, मींस फोटोसिंथेसिस और रेस्पिरेशन होती रहती है और इसकी साइकिलिंग होती रहती है। इट इज मोस्ट एक्टिवली साइकिल्ड कार्बन रेजरवायर। So this is just to give you the idea. You need not to cram these figures. इनको रट्टा लगाने की जरूरत नहीं है, जस्ट आपको एक आइडिया दिया है. अब देखें, एटमॉस्फेयर में कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड is 6.7 into 10 raised to the power 11 metric tons and it is actively cycled. Ocean में बायोमास जो है वो is this much and this is, अब ये bigger size है, so this is not actively cycled. Carbonates this much, not actively cycled. Dissolved and particulate organics जो वहां पे मौजूद हैं, these are comparatively smaller and are actively cycled. लैंड पे कार्बन किस फॉर्म में है? बायोटा है, ह्यूमस है, फॉसिल फ्यूल्स हैं और अर्थ क्रस्ट है. ठीक है. सो दिस इज जस्ट टू गिव यू द आइडिया कि कार्बन के रेजर्वायर्स कौन कौन से हैं. So these are the net carbon flux between selected carbon reservoirs. So how carbon moves from one form to the other. Release by fossil fuel combustion. Fossil fuel की combustion से इतनी carbon metric tons per year release होती है. Land clearing से इतनी carbon per year release होती है. Forest harvest and decay से इतनी carbon release होती है. Forest regrow करने से इतनी कार्बन हासिल होती है हमें. और नेट अपटेक ऑफ ओशंस बाय डिफ्यूजन इज दिस मच एंड एनुअल फ्लक्स इज 9 into 10 raised to the power 9 metric tons of carbon per year. So it is small, actively cycled. जी
सर, ये जो नेगेटिव वैल्यूज दी गई सर, इसका क्या मतलब है?
इसका मैंने बताया,
जैसे सर
बेटा मैंने बताया नेगेटिव का मतलब है गेन, कि गेन होती है कार्बन की.
थैंक यू.
यस, इट इज स्मॉल actively cycled reservoir such as atmospheric carbon dioxide that are subject to alteration by human activity. So the small actively cycled reservoir जो जैसे कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है वो ह्यूमन एक्टिविटी से बड़ी तेजी से अफेक्ट होते हैं, आल्टर होते हैं. ठीक है. Two activities that have reduced amount of fixed organic carbon in these reservoirs and added to atmospheric carbon dioxide reservoir are, दो कौन सी एक्टिविटीज हैं जिन्होंने एटमॉस्फेयर में कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड का लेवल बढ़ा दिया है? Those are utilization of fossil fuels. ठीक है, हम फॉसिल फ्यूल यूज कर रहे हैं, एंड द डिफॉरेस्टेशन, हम जंगलात काट रहे हैं. ये दो मेजर रीजंस हैं जिन्होंने एटमॉस्फेरिक कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड रेजर्वायर का साइज को इंक्रीज किया है. ठीक है. सो दीज आर टू मेजर रीजंस जिसकी वजह से कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एटमॉस्फेयर में बढ़ रही है और उसकी वजह से फिर क्लाइमेट चेंज का फिनोमिना हो रहा है. हम कह रहे हैं जी कि इस साल तक कितने डिग्री टेम्परेचर बढ़ जाएगा. So increase in carbon dioxide has not been as great as expected. Still हम कहते हैं कि ये थोड़ा सा इसको जरा समझने की जरूरत है कि जितना फोटोसिंथेसिस हो रही है और रिलीज हो रही है कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड की, उसका अगर हम थोड़ा सा अंदाजा लगाने की कोशिश करें तो जितनी कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड हमारे अंदाजे के मुताबिक बढ़ चुकी होनी चाहिए थी उतनी नहीं बढ़ी है. जितने हमने जंगलात काटे हैं, हमने शहर बसाए हैं, हमने एग्रीकल्चर की है, उससे अंदाजा अगर लगाएं तो जितनी कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड बढ़ जानी चाहिए थी, बहरहाल एज ए मैटर ऑफ फैक्ट उतनी नहीं बढ़ी है. बढ़ी जरूर है लेकिन उतनी नहीं बढ़ी है. क्यों? दिस इज because reservoir of carbonate found in ocean acts as a buffer between atmospheric and sediment carbon reservoir. कि जो ओशन में कार्बोनेट मौजूद है वो एक बफर का काम करता है कि वो सारी कार्बन को एटमॉस्फेयर में नहीं जाने देता है, कुछ कार्बन को वो कार्बोनेट की फॉर्म में ओशन में स्टोर कर लेता है. अब देखें वंस अगेन अनदर ब्यूटी ऑफ नेचर कि अल्लाह ताला ने उस कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड को एटमॉस्फेयर में अगर ज्यादा चले जाती तो प्रॉब्लम होता. तो उसको रोकने के लिए क्या किया कि ओशन में निजाम रख दिया कि वहां पे कार्बोनेट की फॉर्म में ये स्टोर हो जाता है, ठीक है। सो दिस इज हाउ इट इज स्टोर्ड इन द एटमॉस्फेयर, इन द ओशन। Thus, excess carbon dioxide that has been released has been absorbed by oceans. Umar, what is the difference between absorption and adsorption?
सर एड्सॉर्प्शन जो है वो सरफेस के ऊपर है होती है और एड्सॉर्प्शन जो है वो सर पेनिट्रेट करती है बॉडी के अंदर।
तो जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है एक्सेस, वो पानी में एब्जॉर्ब हो जाती है, पानी की सरफेस के ऊपर स्टिक नहीं करती है बल्कि पानी में एब्जॉर्ब हो जाती है, ठीक है। सो इस तरह से अगर वो पानी में एब्जॉर्ब ना होती तो वो वाली कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड भी एटमॉस्फेयर में जाती और एटमॉस्फेयर में कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड का लेवल और ज्यादा बढ़ता। Net flux of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is about 7 into 10 raised to the power 9 metric tons per year. देखें ये जो फिगर्स मैं आपको बता रहा हूं, अगर आप कोई और बुक देखेंगे तो these may vary a little bit, क्योंकि डिफरेंट एस्टिमेट्स चलते हैं, डिफरेंट साइंटिस्ट रिपोर्ट करते हैं। तो ये भी हो सकता है कि मैंने जो रिपोर्ट आपको ये फिगर दी है ये से 1 साल पहले की है, किसी ने आज लेटेस्ट कोई फिगर दे दी है, तो सो ये फिगर स्लाइटली चेंज हो सकती हैं, इनसे आपको परेशान होने की जरूरत नहीं है, ये जस्ट आपको एक आइडिया देना है। सो नेट इफ्लक्स जी उस्मान फरियाद आप बताएंगे इफ्लक्स क्या होता है?
मींस रिमूवल होना।
Removal, yes, you are right. So net efflux over past 100 years has been 28% increase in carbon dioxide from 0.026% to 0.033%. So गुज़श्ता 100 सालों में 28% कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड इंक्रीज हुई है, and this figure is I took this from the dawn of 25th October 2016, so this must have changed now, ठीक है। So उस वक्त तक this was 400 ppm, 44% above industrial revolution। जब इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन नहीं आया था तो उससे 44% हायर हो गई है, ठीक है। सो अब ये और ज्यादा बढ़ चुकी है कार्बन dioxide in the atmosphere. Okay, now you have to write down an assignment. Everybody write down an assignment please. मैं आपको लिखवा रहा हूं, आप लिख लें।
Yes sir.
Prepare a comprehensive report on the current status of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and discuss the reasons for this increase and elaborate its possible impacts on climate or on atmosphere on climate, ठीक हो गया। So you have to submit this assignment through email आपने email के जरिए, this should not be more than 3 pages and you have to submit it by next class, मींस ट्यूसडे तक आपने ये सबमिट करनी है मुझे। वेंसडे को मुझे कोई सबमिट ना करे, मैं वेंसडे को एक्सेप्ट नहीं करूंगा। आ सकती जूम पे? जी सर कह दूं मैं जूम पे कह। सो ये आपने इसी पे जूम ही पे मुझे सबमिट करनी है। इफ somebody is unable to submit it through Zoom, then he should submit it on my email address. And my email address is, मैं बता रहा हूं आपको, ये जो मेरा नाम है ZAHIR, पहले दो इनिशियल्स उसके बाद पूरा ZAHIR at uaf.edu.pk। सो नेक्स्ट ट्यूसडे तक आपने मुझे ये असाइनमेंट सबमिट करनी है थ्रू ईमेल, जिसमें आपने ये डिस्कस करना है कि इस वक्त करंट स्टेटस क्या है कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड का एटमॉस्फेयर में, उसके मेजर सोर्सेज क्या हैं और उसके पॉसिबल इंपैक्ट्स क्या हो सकते हैं क्लाइमेट पे। ठीक है, ओके, नाउ वी कंटिन्यू विद आवर जॉब। Increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide may contribute to global warming through greenhouse effect। ठीक है, यहां से नहीं लिखना है आपने असाइनमेंट में, आपने मुझे डॉक्यूमेंट्री प्रॉपर साइंटिफिकली बताना है। सो इसका इफेक्ट क्या होगा, ये जो हम कह रहे हैं 44% कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड इंक्रीज हो गई है, तो इसका रिजल्ट हो रहा है ग्रीन हाउस इफेक्ट में। ठीक है, और greenhouse effect is caused by gases in atmosphere that trap heat from sunlight and cause earth to warm up। ठीक है, ये everybody knows that। और वो gases कौन सी हैं? that is carbon dioxide, methane, chlorofluorocarbons and nitrous oxide, जो greenhouse gas effect के लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबल हैं। सो हम सम अप कर सकते हैं कार्बन साइकिल को कि जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है इसको ऑटोट्रोफ्स यूज करते हैं, इट इज कन्वर्टेड इनटू ऑर्गेनिक कार्बन, ऑर्गेनिक कार्बन को हेटेरोट्रोफ्स यूज करते हैं और इट इज अगेन कन्वर्टेड टू कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड। इस तरह से ऑटोट्रोफ और हेटेरोट्रोफ मिल के कार्बन का साइकिल चलाते हैं। ठीक है, सो व्हाट इज कार्बन फिक्सेशन एंड एनर्जी फ्लो। तो यहाँ पे मैं स्टॉप कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि हमारा टाइम हो गया है। अब किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन है तो वो पूछ सकता है, यहीं से हम नेक्स्ट टाइम स्टार्ट करेंगे। नाउ अभी इस चैप्टर में आई विल बी लिटिल बिट फास्ट क्योंकि ये चीजें आपने पहले पढ़ी हुई हैं एंड आल्सो ये थोड़ा सा लेंथी चैप्टर है। हमने इसमें कार्बन साइकिल पढ़ने हैं, नाइट्रोजन साइकिल पढ़ने हैं, फास्फोरस साइकिल पढ़ने हैं, फिर सल्फर साइकिल पढ़ने हैं। सो इसलिए आई विल बी लिटिल बिट फास्ट बट स्टिल आई डू माय बेस्ट कि चीजें आपको समझ आ जाएं। सो अभी किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन है तो वो पूछ ले। ही कैन अनम्यूट हिज माइक एंड आस्क द क्वेश्चन। सब सो गए हैं? उस्मान, फरियाद, मोहम्मद, मगीस, रूहुल्लाह, ये सब सोए पड़े हैं?
नहीं सर, जाग रहे हैं, क्वेश्चन कोई नहीं
जाग
इसलिए
रहे
नहीं
हैं तो
पूछा।
क्वेश्चन कोई भी नहीं आ रहा।
समझ गए सर।
समझ लिया सर
दो रीजन हो सकती हैं जब क्वेश्चन कोई ना पूछे, तो उसकी दो रीजन हो सकती हैं। एक रीजन तो ये हो सकती है कि आपको बिल्कुल ही समझ नहीं आई, बिल्कुल आपके सर के ऊपर से गुजर गया है।
बिल्कुल सर,
ठीक है,
या फिर दो ज्यादा आ
या
जाती
फिर
है।
ये कि आपको ज्यादा ही समझ आ गई है। वो एक जाते जाते आपको एक इंटरेस्टिंग वाकया, एक हकायत सुना देता हूँ। इमाम
सर,
अबू
सुना
हनीफा एक दफा अपनी क्लास को पढ़ा रहे थे, तो उन्होंने एक बच्चा था, वो कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं पूछता था क्लास में कभी भी, बस चुप करके बैठा रहता था, डल सा, बस सुस्त सुस्त सा। उन्होंने उसे कहा बेटा खड़े हो जाओ, पूछना चाहिए ना, क्वेश्चन पूछने से बंदा लर्न करता है, तो तुम क्वेश्चन क्यों नहीं पूछते हो, क्वेश्चन पूछा करो ना, इससे बंदा लर्न करता है। तो उसने कहा ठीक है सर, मैं आइंदा से पूछा करूंगा। वो उस वक्त बात कर रहे थे कि जिस वक्त सूरज गुरूब हो जाए उस वक्त आदमी को रोजा अफ्तार कर लेना चाहिए। उन्होंने जब ये बात खत्म की तो उस बच्चे ने बड़े जोर जोर से हाथ खड़ा करना शुरू कर दिया ना, तो वो बड़े खुश हुए कि यार इसने मेरी बात का बड़ा असर लिया है, फौरन ही क्वेश्चन आ गया है। उन्होंने इससे पूछा, हाँ बेटा क्या बात है, क्या क्वेश्चन है? उसने कहा सर मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि अगर सूरज गुरूब ही ना हो तो ऐसे भी नहीं होना चाहिए, क्वेश्चंस होने चाहिए, क्वेश्चंस पूछने चाहिए फॉर द सेक ऑफ लर्निंग। ठीक है जी, ओके, सी यू नेक्स्ट टाइम इंशाल्लाह।
ओके
टेक केयर
सर।
ऑफ योरसेल्फ।
सर
जी जी
सर मिथेनोट्रॉप्स का आपने बताया था, मिथेनोट्रॉप्स एरोबिक कंडीशंस में वर्क करते हैं।
जी, मिथेनोट्रॉप्स एरोबिक में होती हैं और मिथेनोजेंस जो होते हैं जो मीथेन प्रोड्यूस करते हैं वो एनारोबिक में होते हैं।
ओके सर।
ओके जी, ओके, अल्लाह हाफिज, सी यू नेक्स्ट टाइम इंशाल्लाह। टेक केयर ऑफ योरसेल्फ।
अल्लाह हाफिज।
अल्लाह
सर
हाफिज।
अल्लाह हाफिज।
तो भाई बहुत भयानक दिख रहे हो।
Stop sharing.